Welcome everybody to today's webinar entitled Women in Tech, Is It More Complicated in Africa? Brought to you by AfricArena and the Africa Women Innovation and Entrepreneurship Forum. My name is Justin Norman. I'm the founder and host of a podcast called The Flip, which explores more contextually relevant insights from entrepreneurs changing the status quo in Africa. And I'll be your host and the moderator for today's discussions. And I just want to say before we get started, and in light of the race-related protests happening around the world and in the US in particular, and that are bringing the issues of diversity in tech further to the fore as they should be, that certainly it's important as ever for us to have these types of discussions, but not just talk, but also to share the work that's already being done and that will hopefully compel further action towards the change we wish to see. So I personally am very honored to be a part of today's webinar, and we have 2 panels and 7 esteemed women from our ecosystem here today to tell us about the work they are doing and to lead the discussion. But before we get to that, I'd like to hand it over to Irene Ochem, the founder and CEO of the Africa Women Innovation and Entrepreneurship Forum, and Christophe Viarno of AfricArena, just to say a few words.
Yeah, hi. Hello, everyone. Hope you're all good. To be with you today. So as a word of introduction, my name is Christophe Viarno. I'm the founder and CEO of AfricArena. As Justin said, the goal of AfricArena is really to bridge the greatest tech entrepreneurs of the continent with opportunity in terms of investments from corporates and market access from corporates and investment from VC angels or corporate VC. So we've been running now for 3 years, this is our 4th year. We've run over 50 open innovation challenges. We've had more than 300 startups participating at our event, and combined AfricArena alumni startups have raised in excess of $160 million in the last 3 years. We run thanks to a number of partnerships. There's about 120 partners working with AfricArena, corporates, but also ecosystem partners. And so we're very honored to be partnering today with AWIEF for this event. Like Justin mentioned, I think, we care greatly for being the difference we want to see. And, those numbers you see here, gives you an indication of, what the problem still is, which is that there is a great underrepresentation of female founders on the continent. So if you look at the numbers, last year there was over $2 billion that was raised by tech startups in Africa, and 264 million of these 2 billions were raised by female founded startups. So just more than 10%. Generally speaking, only 17% of the total deals in 2019 were made by startups that are female founded. That's unacceptable. And that's not just a question that there's an underrepresentation in terms of the founders themselves. There also seems to be a bias because a lot of the VC firms run on the continent are led by white male. So we need to strive for diversity at all levels to ensure that, when we look at this number, it grows very rapidly. And that's one of the things that we are very committed at AfricArena. And we hope to be contributing with partners such as AWIEF to contribute. So, we do that thanks to many, many partners. I'm not going to mention them all, but we have a lot of media partners to help us tell the story. And, we hope to see you soon at another AfricArena events. And with that, I'd like to give the opportunity for Irene to intro the event. Thank you, guys.
Hello, everyone. Good afternoon, and thank you for being with us today. So I am Irene Ochem, the founder and the CEO of Africa Women Innovation and Entrepreneurship Forum, AWIEF. AWIEF is we're a Pan-African organization, and we drive women entrepreneurship on the continent. So as you can see here, our mission is to foster the economic inclusion, advancement, and empowerment of women in Africa through entrepreneurship support and development. How do we do this? We have a couple of programs in our portfolio. We host the annual AWIEF conference and awards, which has become your biggest, largest women entrepreneurship event on the continent. We have the AWIEF Awards that we started 3 years ago. With this, we recognize and showcase success stories and celebrate and help empower them to do more. Then we have accelerator programs and incubation programs in our portfolio. Then there is the AWIEF network, which is a big network of women entrepreneurs across the continent. We have the magazine that we launched last year, the AWIEF Insights, to showcase role models and also tell some stories. Then there is the digital platform that we are in the process of launching very soon. So the objective of this webinar today is to dialogue on gender diversity and bias in the African tech ecosystem, including accessing capital and funding, as Christophe has already mentioned. And so the idea is to see what do we need to do differently to fast-track progress in moving more women, in having more women successfully operating in the tech sector. We have seen the upheaval from the coronavirus pandemic and the disproportionate impact, gendered impacts that it has been having. And this has made us realize that we cannot continue to ignore these priority issues of diversity and inclusion. So as AWIEF, we have started delving into working and focusing also in this difficult landscape to contribute to closing the gap. And this is why we have partnered with AfricArena to host this webinar and to discuss the issues, identify ways to help break down those barriers. And we are going to do this with 2 thematic panels, as he already mentioned. In the same vein, we have also recently launched an incubation program called Lead Tech, okay, to support the development and growth of women-owned and women-led tech and digital startups in Africa. Lead Tech is run in partnership with Mohammed VI Polytechnic University, which is a world-class academic institution established by OCP Group of Morocco. Lamia Husni is one of our speakers today, and she's the partner leading this Lead Tech from the side of OCP, and she will be providing more insights on this. So I would please go back to our slide just to thank our sponsors over the years, people who have been supporting us. Please, can we see the slide before this? Hello? Leo, can I please see the slide just to say thank you to our sponsors?
Irene, we'll have to move on without this slide. I'm sorry, Irene.
Okay, that is fine. Yes, okay, no problems. Okay, so over to Justin then.
Thanks so much, Irene, and Christophe as well. And so now we're going to jump right into the panel, and we're going to have 4 panelists who join us on stage. And as they're joining, I just want to say that everyone who's participating, I see some people are sending some things in the chat. We also have that question dialogue. We're going to do a Q&A at the end of each panel, the first panel and the second panel. So please don't hesitate to send us any questions that you have throughout, and then we'll just reserve those questions for the end of the panel. So we'll get the panel started just in a couple minutes once everyone else joins us. Almost there. Okay, well, in the meantime, I'll introduce the three of us who are joining while we wait for the fourth. We have with us Dr. Anita Ramsaran, the GM of Inclusive Innovation, Youth and Skills with TIA, the Technology and Innovation Agency with South Africa. Lamia Husni, who you just heard from before, the head of P Curiosity Lab at University Mohammed VI Polytechnic in Morocco, and she's leading the female-focused lead tech program in partnership with AWIEF. And we have Karine Vavasseur, an ecosystem builder with Lauder in Senegal, the Rapid Entrepreneurship Delegation. It's a $50 million fund targeting youth and women entrepreneurs. Looks like we're missing one panelist, so I think we can get started with the three of us. Oh, we lost one, the two of us for now. I think it would be great just to start this conversation by defining the problem and then talking a little bit about what success looks like and what we're trying to achieve through this dialogue and through many of the initiatives that the panelists here are working on. So maybe Anita, can you start just by talking a little bit about more broadly what the problem is with regards to women in tech and diversity, and what does success look like? You just want to unmute. There you go.
Thank you. Thank you very much. Thank you, participants, and thank you, Irene, for the invitation. So the topic for today is tech entrepreneurs, and is it complicated? So I think we need to just unpack very simply. So what is the complication in terms of what we observe in the South African context? And I speak from the position of a funder, a government funder of tech innovation. So so in terms of what we see in our portfolio is we see two things. We see a struggle at the ideation phase. We see a struggle with coming up with good, viable tech ideas. And that is probably an offshoot of the research and development that goes on, because we do fund a lot of science councils and outputs that come out. So the weaker the innovation output, the weaker the pipeline that comes to TIA. And that happens at the ideation stage. The second area of the value chain that we see quite a lot of complications is in terms of we play a role in the tech development. And once a tech is developed, how does it enter the market? So the commercialization is critical. How do the product enter the market? How does it gain market access? How does it get access to resources, further on funding, etc.? The third area that I want to speak about is what we're exploring now in TIA is what we call an ecosystem approach to funding. So instead of funding just individual projects, what we like to look at is how can we look at what the problem is in a particular sector, in a particular ecosystem, and call for innovation in those areas. So, and in that way, we match together a whole list of ecosystem partners that could actually assist in funding. So, in terms of what we see in the complications with women entrepreneurs, from the TIA perspective, that is those three areas. I want to say that from a government perspective, in TIA, we've predominantly, if I look at our portfolio of women entrepreneurs, and we have a strong move in the next 5 years to move that from 30% to 45% of our portfolio will be women tech entrepreneurs. And when we talk tech entrepreneurs, we're talking entrepreneurs from very low tech solutions to even high tech solutions in artificial intelligence, etc. So Justin, I'll pause there so I don't want to monopolize the platform that's given.
No worries. And I just want to take a moment also to welcome Damilola Teddy Ayula, who's the Director of Startup Support for the Co-Creation Hub in Nigeria. She was just having some technical difficulties, but we're glad she's here with us now.
Thank you very much.
So we're just talking more broadly for Lamia and for Damiloli, just about the problem that exists, just defining the problem and talking about what the solution and what success looks like with regards to increasing gender parity and diversity in the tech ecosystem. So does anyone else want to add to that question and that?
Yes, I'd like to share
experience there. So thank you so much for organizing this event. When I decided to come back to Africa and Senegal in particular, 7 years ago, I joined first an incubator that is named Cetic Dakar, and I was mainly providing support to startups. At the time, I was really surprised by the fact that there was so few women entrepreneurs in the incubator. While at the same time, if I was taking a look at the market, I was seeing so many women entrepreneurs in the other fields, mostly subsistence entrepreneurship. And when I joined there 7 months ago, really surprised that things have not changed so much in 7 years indeed. So if I take at the portfolio, look at the portfolio that we have, for example, at the moment we bring support, financial and technical support to around 70,000 entrepreneurs. 75% of them are women because we have a strong focus on women, and we don't we really encourage women to come and be supported by our programs. But what I see is when I take a look at the innovation and tech fund that we have and that I am part of, only 20% of women entrepreneurs are there. So it's really a huge imbalance between both. You can see 75% if you take the whole portfolio, and if you take the tech and innovations, you just have 20% of women there. So how can we explain that? What is the issue there? Why is STEM young women don't really take a look at or find difficulties to step into? I can go with some data that I have and also from experience because I have been running some programs around STEM and see also there that only 20% of women were participating to the programs. First, we have a real issue with the technical skills, technical training. So most of the people going through technical trainings are men, and most of the people in Africa going through higher education are also men. So we tend, because of cultural barriers, to encourage women to stop their career earlier because they have to take care of the children, they have to take care of the household, and they are not really encouraged in going a step further in their entrepreneurship. So most of the women entrepreneurs you would see in Africa would be running businesses, and a few of them would be running businesses that they can really grow into enterprise that can bring value on the market, and they can go and find funding so that they can really grow their business even outside the country. This is really related to the cultural barrier, I believe, and also to the fact that we don't really push women to do long studies. So that can explain that. Now, regarding finances, I think the skills, the soft skills gap also is an issue there. You would see that if you go into STEM and tech entrepreneurship, at some point you need to be able to pitch your startup. You need to be able to go and raise some funds with the VCs. So it's a whole specific context to raise money. It's not like you go to the bank and you present your project. You have to pitch, you have to be able to really develop your soft skills and to sell what you do. And this is a real issue because soft skills also is not really encouraged in our ecosystem. Because we tend to believe that the man should be the one leading, and so there is this distinction between what is the role of a female, and she would be managing the household, but she would not be leading for real in environment. So soft skills is not really developed. So that becomes really like blockages that are there from scratch, and that you can also find out when you go into understanding why there are so few women really going in entrepreneurs in the tech entrepreneur side.
You also wanted to add something to that topic. Do you want to jump in?
So
we're having a little bit of trouble hearing you. Sorry. Sorry. She'll come back. Go on.
Yeah. I think just to add, just to emphasize on Karin's point as well,
I believe that there's a strong link between education and having more women in technology. If you don't get a lot of women going and studying things like, like tech-related subjects or science-related subjects, it filters through at the end of the day. You don't see a lot of women becoming tech entrepreneurs. You find a lot of women being entrepreneurs in other places, doing excellently well, from business to catering, like so amazing, to furniture. But when it comes to tech, then, it's crickets, very few. And if you run programs, it doesn't matter how much effort you put in, like specific content for women, it's still, the percentage is still low. So looking at it, I feel very strongly, and Karine has mentioned it, that if we want to go to the foundational roots, it has to be from, in Nigeria, secondary school level. Most people know it as high school level. When people have to choose whether they go into the sciences, when people have to choose for the universities or colleges, whether they study technical subjects or not, and encouraging women from that point in time that it's okay. I remember when I wanted to start in the university and it was supposed to be electrical subject, and everyone said, no, that is just for men. Like there's only one woman there, you don't want to go there. And I didn't go, I changed my subject, luckily to computer science, but I could have picked any other thing and I would not even be here right now. So you get that fear from the beginning, that, well, and why? There's no reason behind it, but nobody asks. So I think that's like one of the foundational issues, but then there are some other things that I feel like we can do, and we can discuss later as to how do we see in the short term a turnaround, and then in the long term, what do we do?
Yeah, and that's a great point I think that we can expand on, is when talking about interventions that have positive impact. I mean, are there certain things that you've seen, whether you said like it's at the primary school level or other levels of the development, where interactions and interventions in particular have had a specific effect? And, how do we balance, like you said before, the short-term impact versus the long-term impact? Does anyone want to share any experience or insights in regards to that?
I'm not, sorry.
I'm sorry, I will just jump in on it. Do you hear me, guys?
Yes, we do.
Yeah, I'm so sorry for this problem. As you know, there is a real need to have a specific program for incubation and support for women in Africa. And when we are talking about specific programs, there is kind of specific soft skills that women need to be improved and need to be developed, like trust, and also how to manage stereotype. So people think that women in Africa can't do a really business by their own, and they can run financial issues. So it's needed to have specific programs. So as Iron mentioned earlier, we did this with the Lead Tech program. It's a kind of an incubation program that we launched with AWIEF, and it's an intensive 6 months incubation based on competition model. And when we select the women that we will win this competition, we will have they will have the opportunity to access to mentors, and there is and it's very important for their entrepreneurship journey, and also the training and corporate partners. So partners that they are really mobilized for support women. And there is also a community of change maker committed to women's entrepreneurship. So we need to foster and to develop and to have more events and programs dedicated to women in entrepreneurship.
If I can jump in, Justin.
Yeah, please.
Yes, on our from in the South African context, I think a few things are key that I'd like to mention. Firstly, in terms of support for tech development and infrastructure support. So South African government has invested quite significantly into what we call technology stations. So even though a woman entrepreneur may not have studied the sciences, the engineerings, they would be able to access high-end infrastructure as well as high-end technical expertise at a technology station. And we have about 18 of these in our country in various disciplines. And on a yearly basis, we have between 3,000 entrepreneurs actually accessing the services. And about 50% of them actually are women. So that is around how government actually provides the enabling infrastructure for tech innovation. The second point I want to raise, which our previous speaker has raised around mentorship. And what we found is that we needed two types of mentorship. So an entrepreneur needs to be linked to two types of mentors. One would be the technical mentor that will help them with the technical aspects of the project. And the other is the business mentor that will help with regards to helping that business grow. Also key is for organizations, government organizations, national organizations to play that connector role, where you connect your innovation, your entrepreneurs into the ecosystem. And that cannot be just limited to nationally. You can go regionally as well as internationally. And you'd find a number of programs that are actually in place for you to access international markets. There's so many. There's one actually on commercialization that we have with the UK funded by the UK Newton Fund. There's others on venture leaders program that is funded by the Swiss. So there's a lot of opportunities, I think, in this space. It's just about how do you connect to those opportunities, and having platforms that actually do help you with those connections. Mentorship platforms, networking platforms, etc., are crucial so that we move our ideas into market and women entrepreneurs get the necessary resources. Thanks.
Can I jump in there?
Yes, please.
So, thank you so much, Anita, because you're raising some really good points around the existing programs, and there are a lot of things that are done to try to tackle the challenges around more women in entrepreneurship. But I think the main challenge we need all to tackle together, and this is going to be the most complicated one, is how do we get to change our mindset? Do we get to change the market mindset and the social mindset around what is the role of an African woman in the society at home? And this is really the issue at the end of the day, because this explains everything about how women are raised, what they are put in their mind about what they are able to do or not, where they should go or not, what they should do or not. And this is really deeper than even having some specific programs about bringing support to them afterwards. So we need also to go deeper into before, what can we do to change the mindset? And I think this is a challenge for changing some mindset for most of the issues we meet in the. It's really about mindset.
Yeah, I need. Sorry, Justin. I want just to jump on it on this point. There is a lot of challenges in African continent. So there is really great opportunities for women to do business and using STEM. There is a kind of need in financial services. STEM can allow for the financial inclusion of large majority of population in Africa. And regarding the education, using STEM, we can have better content for students and better training for teachers. So, and also in healthcare services and agriculture. So there is a kind of really opportunities in business in Africa. And we need us as people who provide service to support entrepreneurship, women entrepreneurship, to highlight these opportunities for this people, for women, and to highlight these opportunities and to provide them support and programs, specific programs in healthcare and services, not only in technology, but also in a profession like agriculture or like supply chain retail. So women can tackle these challenges using technology. Thank you.
Do you want to talk maybe just a little bit about the tech program in particular? I mean, that's one such program that's currently being implemented that's trying to achieve some of the ends that you mentioned.
Yeah, we launched the Lead Tech program in 5 sectors, including education, healthcare, and agriculture. As you know, African continent and people and citizens, African citizens, are facing a lot of issues in this field and in this area. So with AWIEF and with Ireland, we designed this program dedicated to receive 20 women from several countries to integrate a kind of support program, mentorship, training, but not only that. As Curiosity Lab is an innovation lab within UM6P University, so we have under this program we can provide the women's support and infrastructure like living lab, farm, experimental farm, Fab Lab, and other infrastructure, so they can prototype and test. Not only that, we develop a network around these women that they will join this program with networks of experts, mentors, and business and investors.
It's fine. I also just wanted to add, so what I was saying about like short-term things that can be done is also just a call to be able to expand programs that we set up, and that's for everyone, even some of the attendees on the call, to include women in business in general. So sometimes there's that tendency to always say this particular program is for women tech, women-owned tech businesses or things like that, but I think there is some work to be done around this program is Women in Business, like come and hear how you can leverage technology. You may not be using it. So we had a few examples as well, even at CC Hub. We have a lady who does furniture on her own, was a one-woman business doing furniture business. And now we've been able to say, you know, this is how you can use tech. This is how you can use virtual reality. It's very short term, but it's, you know, it exposes them to how you can leverage technology to make your businesses better. I've had programs before where if it's strictly women in SMEs, people want to just talk about loans. And, you know, the tendency is that, oh, women are likely to take loans because that's what they know. But if you talk about equity, for example, it's something you should at least just learn and know. You can further find more information. But if we want more women to go into tech, and in tech, we know more conversations around that is there are other things aside loan. Why do we then take out that information from them when we have a women SME program? So the things that we do in tech, we need to expand and promote it to women in businesses. So some of our programs need to be, you know, you're a woman in entrepreneurship, come. If you want to see how you can leverage tech, come in. So there needs to be like changes around the wordings we use and things like that. So just like some of the things I've discussed in the past and also things that I've discussed with a few people on how we can close the gap on the short term, expanding what we have and benefits to women in entrepreneurship in general, because they're there.
And has the CC Hub done anything in particular that may be a best practice in terms of better community outreach to the people that you're trying to participate that, you know, may be worth sharing for the benefit of everyone here?
Yeah, so we currently have like a Women in Business program, which also touches on that as well. And then we, like I mentioned before, in terms of investment, we have done investment in women that we're not exactly in tech, just like there was a lady who was just going to the market to buy stuff for people, and that's pretty manual. But if you bring technology and you bring like resources and mentorship, then you can show how it will work. She might not be able to write the code, which means we have to think around CTO. It's a bit more work, But you know, even in terms of how you invest in startups, you can expand like your thesis for investment when it comes to women. And then when you have women in business program like the one I mentioned, you can also expand it to women who are doing things that tech could help.
Yeah, and you know, one last question that I'd like to ask before we open up to the Q&A, and we see some questions coming through, and please continue to share more. You know, we talked in Korean, you mentioned at the beginning the breakdown of, you know, gender between some of the programs that you're, you know, that you're implementing in Senegal, and then there's a number of different women-specific programs. So how do we think about that in terms of, you know, in terms of there needing to be women-specific programs versus increasing women's participation in programs that are more agnostic? And I can even say from my perspective, when they asked me to moderate this panel, at first I said, maybe we should get a woman to moderate it. And, you know, it's an open question that I have of, you know, obviously at ecosystem at large, men obviously have a role to play in this, but, you know, what's the impact of a women-specific program versus trying to increase the participation of women in programs that are not for women specifically? So does anyone want to address that?
Can I give a shot, Justin? I think the question, I'd like to turn your question around a bit, and rather asking for a women-specific program, but ask for a targeted program, a targeted call, for an example. So if you put a call out for tech entrepreneurs, and you could say that the call is only for women entrepreneurs. In our case, in South Africa, we have other demographics that we need to take care of. So sometimes we have a targeted call only for African entrepreneurs, or a targeted call only for disability, or women in disability, or African women that are disabled. So having a particular, you can keep your instruments, but having them targeting women in a particular phase or section is important. But for me, I think the debate needs to just be a little broader. Because what we find, and this is in international literature as well, is that when there is a diverse team in a venture, the venture actually does better. So bringing women onto a team is actually bringing them onto the management structure of a project team. Actually helps the project to develop better, to reach markets better. So for me, I'd like to push that angle. Instead of us just focusing only on a solely women team, let's bring about a diverse team with a stronger role for women on the management, on the governance, on the operations, on the operation side. And the another point I want to pick on is that we find ourselves in a time in South Africa where through our white paper on science and technology that has been released this year, that we need to shift resources to underdeserved areas. And there was mention of living labs earlier, and I'm actually piloting a living labs program in South Africa. But we're piloting this specifically in rural areas. We have the 4 economies, but for us in this program, we're focusing on township and rural, and looking at how we can bring the demographics, the women entrepreneurs onto this, where they can co-create a solution, a challenge in the community. Together with the community, you co-create it, you have access to market, you're co-creating with your users. The other point I want to raise is that there was some questions around the market access challenge that many women entrepreneurs face. And so what we find is we look at innovation in 2 ways. One is where you come up with an idea, you push this technology into a market, and then you got to find a market. Sometimes the market doesn't exist. So you project a market, and then you try that, a difficult road to follow. And then there is the other case where there is a market pull, where the market already exists. The market has a strong need, and you come up with a solution to meet that market. So when we pose challenges, innovation challenges, we towards a market pull type of challenge, where the market already exists. So market access doesn't become that big a challenge for this particular innovation or challenges that we see. So just a little bit on my side. Thanks.
Thank you. Does anyone else want to jump in on this topic?
There's a case for, just let me, just back to what you were saying, there is a case for, I typically lean towards mixed programs, but I've definitely been in open conversations where cases were made for the fact that if we consider some cultural challenges in different areas, social challenges around women right from the beginning, then there is a space for women-focused programs, like they should exist. So yes, I think both of them, we have to be, because I don't particularly feel like everyone would be able to make women-focused programs. And I hate the fact that as a woman, you might miss out from the benefits of a mixed program than a women-focused program. And someone mentioned in the chat that some of those women-focused programs are just like, you know, PR and branding, and you know, you miss out of the real deal. So, but I understand the cases being made for the fact that there are some women that will feel more comfortable in the women-focused programs, and those can exist, at least in the short term, whilst we try to promote mixed programs and increased participation there as well. So eventually in the future, my hope is that we can all move to a mixed program where women feel comfortable attending those kind of programs and not just looking out for women-focused programs.
Is it an issue of, just to follow up on that last, I mean, is it an issue of comfortability in a mixed program, or is it equally an issue in sort of a bias that exists from a selection process?
How do you mean by bias that exists from the selection process?
So the people that are choosing participants to participate in a program, are they not picking women, or is it that there's not enough women that are applying?
There are not enough women applying. Yeah. Right now, I don't think it benefits anyone not to pick women, just from even a global branding perspective. So you literally find, at least with applications that I've dealt in different programs, we're literally looking for women. Sometimes you even see people saying, oh, at least there is a female founder on the founding team. And you're like, yay, okay, that's great. So I don't think there's any one right now. If there is, then that's just foolishness. But it's more of, at least from my end and my experience, not having a lot of women apply from the beginning.
I just want to jump to this point. Yes, that's right. There is no enough women apply to these programs. In my side, in Morocco, we launched several programs, hackathon and challenges, and there is more men than women's. So this is a kind of issues when we discuss with these young people, or they are not enough comfortable. So that's why in the beginning of our discussion, we discuss about soft skills, so confident, and how to really be a lead, to have a kind of leadership in their life. This is very important for women.
Yes. And you know, I mentioned before, I used to be running STEM programs. So by experience also, I mentioned that there were about 20% of women that really applied and made it to the programs. And what was really surprising, but positively, is that 20% were always doing the program until the end. So they were always among the top students of our cohorts. So they are really good, but when they come, the main issue we had was that they were coming with so much shyness. They were not really daring to go in front and express themselves, whereas they were so full of potential. At some point to do some specific. So you have like a program that is tailored for everyone to come in, but at the end of the day, you need to still do some specific session with women for them to grow their leadership, for them to grow their self-confidence. So that was the two key points we needed to specifically coach with women. So this is why also I believe we still need to have some specific programs for women so that they can also grow their confidence. Maybe they feel more comfortable, like Daniela said, when they are between themselves and they can express themselves and they can talk about what are the deep issues that they face that explains why they don't dare in anything in life, why they don't dare living their dreams, why they don't dare even dreaming sometimes. And Yes, so we need to also have those kind of programs, but at the same time, we still need to have more women coming into the more generic mixed programs. And I think there is something really interesting that was mentioned before by Anita, is about the leadership, how women lead also. And for me, there is a specific way of leading when you take women, because from the beginning of our life, we are already managing. We are already managing our brothers, sisters who are managing the household. Then we grow into women that go into wedding, and we still have to manage our family. And we manage the resources also in this family. So we already have this management skills there that we have grown up. What is really missing is confidence and being able to grow the leadership. And this is why we need to have specific programs around that. But you will see also, and there are some studies around it, that what really aspire, the deep aspirations of women for entrepreneurship are really different from men. Most of the time when you ask a man why he decided to go into entrepreneurship, he would say, because I want to be my own boss, I want to, and it's really focused on this most of the time, not every time. Whereas for women, it will be about how I can change my family's life, how I can change the world for it to be a better place. So it's really about how can I solve problems. So when you get to also push women leadership, you will see another type of leadership and impact in the society.
We have two interesting questions, I think, on this topic and to that point. One is the idea about a pre-accelerator program for women, training on the soft skills and ideation before they apply to a mixed program. And then the other, though, is talking about, to your point, about there being different aspirations for men versus women entrepreneurs, and the way in which information is disseminated. You know, perhaps there ought to be two different calls for applications that touch on those specific desires for men versus women. So what are your thoughts about that in terms of segmenting the messaging accordingly, and perhaps even creating additional women's like pre-acceleration programs with the specific goal of trying to get more women to be ready or feel comfortable or whatever it may be to apply to the mixed programs?
Justin, can I jump in? Sorry, I've got a bad habit about moderator's question. So I think
by all means,
our experience has shown that we actually have two types of women. We have the strong scientific engineering type of woman who want to compete on the same platform as men and would want to shy away from specific calls or soft programs, etc. And then we have the other women who are the kind of women that we're talking about. So when we're designing programs, I think just bear in mind, a lot of the women entrepreneurs that came from a research environment or a science council environment actually want to compete on the same platform as men. They don't want any special treatment. They want things. They want to be, and you'll find that because tech innovation leads to expansion and scale out at a much larger scale, you'll find that they do well because of their leadership skills that speaker mentioned previously. So I just wanted to just say that sometimes we need to just identify the type of woman we're targeting as well. Who are the ones that actually require this pre-accelerator support? I totally agree with the concept, but there is not every woman that come into your portfolio that would actually want that.
And I suppose that's the challenge with making, you know, more broad sweeping generalization statements as well. But does anyone else want to add to that? No. Okay. Well, I
think it's just showing that we agree.
Oh, that's good. Yeah. Agreement is good.
We're agreeing that we need the pre-accelerator program and we need the soft skills to bring the soft skills into this for women. Particularly, I'm seeing a lot of this in our, when we do our Living Labs program or even our grassroots innovation program, where we bring in people that have no access to innovation networks and we bring them into the fold and help them develop their tech. Thanks.
Another question that we were asked in the chat was just talking about programs targeting women from less developed areas. And so maybe Lamia, I know you have some rural focused initiatives. So can you tell, what are your thoughts on that? And certainly targeting women who even have less access to information and resources and different things like that. What's happening in Morocco that you're working on towards that end?
I lost you. Can you just repeat the question, please?
Sure. So there was just a question about targeting women in less developed areas and programs specifically for women with even less access to resources than somebody perhaps in a main city. And I know that that you're working on some rural development initiatives. So I hope she can still hear me. So I'm wondering if you can tell us a little bit about that. Did you lose me? She lost me.
Yeah, okay. I'm so sorry for
Let's see what else. There are some more questions that came in.
Yeah.
So Anita, there's a question that comes in. How do we think that we can help how we can more help the second type of woman? So would you mind speaking to that a little bit in terms of the two types of women helping the second type?
Yes, so maybe I just reiterate what I said, and that is definitely a pre-accelerator program is crucial. But that pre-accelerator program should be well structured in terms of providing the soft skills, the soft support. Also, even at the ideation stage, to help identify who would be the partners in the ecosystem to help take this innovation forward. Remember at the beginning of my presentation, I did say that we approach innovation from an ecosystem approach where we look at a multi-stakeholder program with a lot of partners coming on board. So identifying right at the outset who would be the best institutions to tap into for funding, for follow-on funding, for market access, etc. So pre-accelerator or what we call pre-investment support is what we would normally refer to in our organization is critical. How do we help you to develop a quality proposal that you can take out to funders? How do we help you map your technology map in terms of where you're going to source the different kinds of funding? Who can we connect you to? Which is the technical expert? Which is the business expert that we think you need along the way? And if I can just use an analogy, Justin, we refer to this as a glass pipeline. So what we have is when an innovator enters the system, we don't want you to go and knock at 10 institutions' doors in order to help you support your product, right? So we try to form institutional relationships with different government departments that will help to support you towards commercialization and entry into the market. So you don't fill in a new application each time you go. We come together as a team. We have a common due diligence process. We have a common assessment process. You come into our assessment and approvals, and you get an idea in terms of exactly what we're funding. You have an interest, you commit to that interest, and then you take that entrepreneur on as a follow-on funder. So those are some of the things we're exploring to make sure that we move the product along the innovation value chain and into the market. And definitely a lot of pre-investment support is required. And we have various programs in the organization, from skills programs, mentorship, and even what we call a soft landing program. And I don't know if I have time to explain briefly what I mean by this. So for an example, if somebody from Morocco had to land in South Africa, we would identify an incubator where a person can come in with their idea, with their product. You can take space in an incubator for a period of a week, 2 weeks. We introduce you to the ecosystem. You get introduced to all the partners, etc. And we have on-site expertise to help you in terms of finding the relevant networks. So that is what we have what we call a soft landing program. So you come, you land softly in South Africa for your product. I'll stop there. Thank you.
Yeah, and just to wrap up now, we're going to head over to the second panel where we're speaking specifically about investment. So I know there were some questions about that, but before we do, I just wanted to thank all of you panelists. I don't know if there's any other final closing words or just to share maybe a little bit more information about your respective initiatives. But Karina, Lamia, do you want to start?
Yeah, I just want to add something to our discussion and or the insight that we add. there is the importance of data to be available for their women in entrepreneurship. Data, when we are talking about data, but also using data analysis for them to develop their business. So, and we, as I observe in Morocco, we found a lot of men, but no women. So I just want to invite women to give some importance for data analysis and data and to run their business. This is what I want to add, and thank you so much.
Thank you, and sorry to do this, but we're actually being asked now to switch to panel number 2. So I just also wanted to say again, thank you to the 4 of you ladies for joining, and I know that the AfricArena folks will send out some more information just on the various things that you're doing. And if anyone has some follow-up questions, I know that they'll be able to reach out. But we're going to transition over now to panel number 2, in which we have 3 women investors in the space. So just bear with us one moment while we transition over, please. And while we're waiting for the transition, I'll just make the introductions. We're going to have Andriata Muforo, who's a partner at TLCom Capital, a venture capital firm based. Well, it's not based in Kenya. It's diversified, but she's based in Kenya. We have Kathy Goddard, who just joined, who is the CEO and founding partner of FireFem Fund Managers in South Africa, and then, if she's able to join, oh, here she is now, Miriam Diop, the partner at Orange Digital Ventures. It's a corporate VC through the telecom Orange, and she is based in Senegal. So welcome to the 3 of you, and thanks so much for joining us all.
Thank you.
So where I think I want to start, if you guys don't mind, is just with an anecdote from my own experience. I recently gave an interview for my podcast, The Flip, with a private equity investor, Takumba Ishmael, who some of you may know. She does gender lens investing, and she has a gender lens fund in partnership with a South African fund manager, and Takumba's with Alethea Capital. And I was talking to her about this spreadsheet that goes around in the tech space that shows how many entrepreneurs have raised over $1 million in tech, and it's 99% male. And the thing that she said to me was she challenged, whether or not that was a problem. I mean, certainly it is a problem, but whether that's the right lens to look through it in saying, what types of businesses are women starting, and, are women starting businesses, for example, that don't necessarily need to raise $1 million in funds, and that's why they're not showing up. And so maybe Kathy, I can start with you, because I know that FireFem Fund has a number of different types of investment vehicles, and you do an SME equity fund, for example. So you're not necessarily making traditional venture capital investments, and perhaps that has more of an impact on the your ability to source deal flow of women founders. So can you speak a little bit about that, and what types of businesses should we be looking to fund in this regard?
Absolutely, thank you, and hello everybody. Yes, so FireFem is still fundraising. So we're on the road show. We're basically 100% woman-owned business that is fundraising for our own funds. So therein already lies a difficulty, and I'd love to share some of the challenges we face in that regard. The experience that I could bring to this webinar is I sit on the investment committee of 2 venture capital funds. One is called Savant Technology, which has an incubator and does pre-revenue investments, and the other is called 4DI, which does pre-revenue software investments. So I have quite a lot of experience in seeing the deals from that angle. But yes, to your point, Justin, in the SME space, I have a very strong view that we are always looking to fund women in businesses that are too small. So we have a natural fit in VC, and VC is quite a broad range, can also be called small, SGBs, small growing business, can also be early stage startups, and it's all a little bit blurred as to what the actual definitions are. I'm quite passionate about investing in mid-market, fairly sizable SMEs and making sure that women are brought into ownership. If they're not there already, bringing them into ownership. So that is what we want to focus on. And I do, somebody asked on the question, I think it was Kathleen Siminu, said, are women perceived to be riskier investments or not? And there is a report out, and she said, is there research on this? Yes, there is. There's a report by the IFC called Moving Towards Gender Balance, which is fabulous, which shows that gender diverse teams, especially in the VC space, can enhance returns as much as 20%. But what I did want to just quickly point out also on that research is that women get more funding at accelerator incubator stage than they do in the more advanced stages. And IFC has also done research which says that women are owners of smaller businesses, but as the businesses grow, that ownership level diminishes. There's a lot of reasons about that. We can unpack it, all the social bias, unconscious bias, and there's a lot of research on it. But I'll hand back to you, Justin.
Definitely going to get into some of the bias questions, but Andriata and Miriam, so you are both more tech VCs with your own set of commercial objectives, and in the case of TLCom you have LPs, and in the case of Orange you have a corporate with its own strategic initiatives. So I'd love to hear from your perspective, each of you, what it's like, as women investors trying to increase, the participation of women founders and directing more capital towards women founders. Maybe can one of you go, one at a time, just and share a little bit from your experience of how you're trying to overcome this challenge?
So essentially, we are a tech VC fund investing across sub-Saharan Africa in early to growth stage tech-enabled businesses across the continent. And I think also maybe a bit later, I would like to touch on the point that you raised before. I think if you think about, the way we think about it at TLCom is we're completely aligned in terms of team that's seeking diversity. We always make fun of the fact that we write a book where we say there was a Zimbabwean, a Nigerian, an Israeli, and an Italian who decided to start an Africa-focused tech VC fund. So I think just from the core team, we're 50% women and 50% African women at that. So I think within the very DNA of TLCom, we embrace diversity, and we also it's something that we use as we are also making investments. And because it enriches the discussions, we also have difference in background, so not just in terms of where people are from, but even just in differences of experiences. We have some are entrepreneurs, some have been consultants and the like. So I think, so as TLCom, we bring that lens when we're thinking about investing across the continent. And then aligned with that, we're quite excited about, we see the lack of depth in the VC ecosystem on the continent because it's fairly young. It's really a couple of years. So as TLCom, we do a number of initiatives to try and support the tech ecosystem so that it grows. Because, when you think about, say, exits or advisors, fundraising, you find that you find some here, but you're looking in Europe, you're looking in the US, you're looking in Asia, in order to be able to get a rounded, in order to get the resources that you need to be able to really grow the companies and support the companies. So I think, so as TLCom, what we've done within the ecosystem space is we see many gaps. So one, we've done work around mentorship and with entrepreneurs. So every year we actually twice a year now we'll have a CEO summit where we bring together entrepreneurs to be able to support each other. Because entrepreneurs across the continent, entrepreneurs generally are alone, and tech African entrepreneurs are very much alone. So us as investors, we see a lot and talk to many entrepreneurs. So we want to use that platform to be able to bring entrepreneurs together. and then they can share their experiences in Nigeria, in Ghana, in Kenya, and the like. And then we also, as of last year, we started an initiative around female founders, female tech founders, because what we find is that even in the pipeline, there are very few. And I think this was a discussion in the previous panel as well. So you have a small pipeline. So by nature, that number of investments will also be small. Because generally, VC investments are in 1% to 2% of the companies that the VC funds see. So we started a yearly event where we're supporting Africa female founders, so bringing them together, also for them to build connections and to build networks and to support one another and create a safe environment for them to share their experiences, because there are not many. So those are some of the things that we're doing as TLCom. And also, within our portfolio, we have made investments in, so 3 of our companies are female founders. The lens is never, is this a female? The lens is this a good company for us to invest? So is this a good VC investment? And then, of course, if it's a female founder, that's, wonderful icing on the cake. But within our portfolio, we have found also some diversity there.
And Miriam, do you want to add a bit as well?
Hello, everyone. Yeah, I think it's very important first of all to give a certain perspective on women getting VC money in Africa today. Africa is, I think, the continent counting the highest number of women entrepreneurs, as we already said. In sub-Saharan Africa, 27% of women are entrepreneurs, with 2 African countries amongst the top in the world, Uganda and Botswana. And 16% of VC-backed founders are female compared to 7% in the rest of the world. These are statistics from 2018. So I think in a certain way, Africa is really paving the way for other geographies. But of course, we need more of them. Especially, we need to see more successful women entrepreneurs who start backing the next generation of entrepreneurs as well. But this is not only a gender issue, of course. So first thing, I believe in education and training to equip women with the skills they need to start sustainable and exitable companies, because we're talking about VC in my perspective. So this is one of the reasons why I started the Dakar Network Angels, which is the first regional angel network investing in Francophone Africa, with members based across the 4 corners of the world. We invest in pre-seed and seed. We try to bridge the funding gap between seed and early stage. But beyond the money, we are really setting up an ecosystem of resources that Francophone entrepreneurs can tap into for scaling, and women entrepreneurs mostly. The DNA is also the first investment academy in that region that educates angels and potential angels on methods for investing, mentoring, creating more value across that ecosystem. So it's very important, because in a certain way as well, we definitely need to add a certain shift on men's side. We need to educate male founders very early to think differently, to start hiring women at high positions in their companies and early enough to make it part of the DNA of the company at some point. So this is something that we're trying also to impulse. And more generally in the investments landscape, we need to hire, of course, and promote more women investors. This is more difficult on our end, because out of the team of 12 people, we are 3 women investors. I'm myself based in Africa, and my other female colleagues are in Paris, but still we're making a lot of efforts. I think, again, Africa is really showing the way compared to other regions. We still have a long way to go. And in regards to our portfolio companies, out of the 5 companies we funded, we have just 1 out of 5 female-led business. Still, we have, let's say, 25% women in the management team of the portfolio companies. So it's a good start, but still room to improve.
Yeah, and that sort of raises a really interesting point, which is back to the prior discussion about interventions at different levels of the value chain. I mean, certainly we'd like to see all of the above, right? We'd like to see more women investors. We'd like to see more women fund managers. We'd like to see more women founders. We'd like to see more women on the executive team. So what role can you as investors, and are you as investors playing in irrigating the pipeline, but then simultaneously also working at different levels of the value chain to insert opportunity and to improve? And certainly if we see more women executives, for example, will we, at some point in turn see more women founders? And does that sort of get the flywheel going in the positive direction? Is there any work that any of you are doing around that to sort of get the flywheel going positively and make change at certain levels of the value chain?
Sure. So I can go. So I think if you think about it, so there's the core in terms of your actual team as a VC fund. So thinking about how diverse your team is and your ability to then be able to make investments that would encompass female entrepreneurs. Because in practice, so say for example, if you're an all-male team, it'll be very difficult for you to invest, say, in a cosmetic company or a hair company. You're just a little bit farther from the product. It can happen, but I think it's, the likelihood is fairly low. So I think the first step, I think as VC funds think about it, is really about the team. And this is for us at TLCom, this is, something that we think about for ourselves, and then also encourage our portfolio companies to do the same, because, as Kathy was saying in the beginning, there is actually financial return to diverse teams on the company level as well as on the fund level. And then on I think, so that's like your core team. And then I think now, in terms of how you do business, so for us at TLCom, we think about our pipeline, because also if you're gonna increase the odds of investing in more female founders, you need to have a large enough pipeline and go to the places where female founders are to be able to capture, to bring them into your pipeline. So we're fairly intentional about that in terms of the events we host, the places we speak. So make sure that we are accessible to entrepreneurs. So I sit at the iHub, for example, here in Nairobi. So I'm not hidden in some ivory tower. I'm here. So entrepreneurs can reach me, and I'm available within the ecosystem. And this is the same as well for my other colleagues. So I think part of it is being accessible and within the ecosystem. And then also, I think then we do stuff on the broader ecosystem. So this is what I was mentioning earlier around, so the Female Founder Summit that we host. And then also we've committed to mentoring, I think 3 to 4 female entrepreneurs, tech entrepreneurs every year. So within the TLCom team, so we're quite accessible to them and give advice. And I think also what we do more intentionally is, within our pipeline, if say we see a company that's female founded and we don't end up investing, we still give advice to the company, and then are also able to touch, there are many reasons why you don't end up investing, right? It could be stage, it could be just, so we still also keep in touch. So to make sure that whatever support we can give them, whatever introductions we can make, we're able to provide that for the female entrepreneurs. And then hopefully, over time, the catchment will increase. But I think these are just some of the steps that we're taking.
Kathy or Miriam, do either one of you want to jump in?
Yeah, just to add on that, I definitely agree with Andrea. I think being visible and accessible definitely helps attract quality deal flow overall, but also attract more female-led businesses. Even though I think there are challenges to solve at the very beginning first to get more let's say quality deals led by female in general. But I'm very happy in my position that I have the privilege to fight biases because I'm a woman first, and also because I really try to do my best to fight investment illiteracy that prevent women-led businesses to get funded in general. So to prepare them to receive funds whenever the business is ready to do so. I'm also part of several women networks where we share advice and best practices in that regard. And I'm also a mentor of a few women entrepreneurs. But of course, there's no ideal solution to make it work. There are different, I think, approaches to test in the long run.
That's a great point. I just thinking back to the first part of the panel where we were talking about women not applying for enough programs if it wasn't a woman-specific program. So is that part of it as well, as to say, like, we'll invest in you, maybe we have to work with you a little bit beforehand, but there's sort of like a soft skills and qualitative element to building up the pipeline and to getting more women to actually apply for funding, or to reach out looking for funding from investors such as you people. Kathy?
Justin, can I pick up that one? Because
yeah, absolutely.
I think it's really important that women reach out into networks, and there are a lot of networks that you can tap into. I, for instance, am a member of a very, very chatty and successful network called Women in Africa Finance. We share a lot of information, and that's how we learn what's going on. But here's just even a simpler little tip: is go onto Twitter, find the organizations that you really want to hear about, and make sure you've got your alerts on, so where you can see something's coming up. So Cartier, Visa, there are thousands of them, Rockefeller, whole loads of them put out calls for proposals all the time. And you just need to change your feed, that you're getting the good stuff and not reading all the bad stuff every day. But also because they've done research in VC and private equity, and there are clicks and trust networks, and that is how deals typically originate. They originate through the people who work in those organizations. Most deals come through referral base. So you're never going to get actually seen if you're not in some sort of active network. You've got to get out there. And you've got to be unashamedly out there. Women, we sort of defer a little bit. Don't defer. Get out there, ladies, is all I can say.
Yeah, absolutely. And, we've alluded a little bit to the existence of biases as well. And again, back to, I think, the value chain of biases existing in multiple levels of the value chain. And I think back to, examples of, male VCs getting pitched a woman-focused product and saying that they need to go ask their wife if it's something that is worth investing in. So, Andriata, you mentioned at least the importance of having diverse investment teams and having a diversity in terms of the investors, but it goes up from there. Obviously, you have an investment committee and you have LPs, and so how, and this is a question for everyone, how do you work to mitigate the biases and perhaps to coach up those who are involved in the investment decisions and our stakeholders to be able to say much of what we've talked about today, that like, look, investing in women is smart for these reasons, and we shouldn't have to bend over backwards to convince you that it's the right investments to make? Go ahead.
I think if I think about TLCom specifically, I don't think there's anyone necessarily we need to coach up, because the partners are the investment committee, and then we have some independents. But luckily, we're a team that understands and sees that because of the diversity within the team. I think what I would say to the entrepreneurs that are listening is that I think one of the ways to fight bias that people may have is actually to have a solid company. Because if you show up with a really good business, I don't think, like, savvy investors will look past all their biases because it's a good business, and they can see the value that the business is creating. So I think what's in the power of the entrepreneur or the female entrepreneur is to build a good business, and then also to educate yourself and be informed. So when you're approaching the investors, you have a good sense of what is it that they're looking for, how do they make their decisions, So for us, we're looking at, is this a good market in terms of growth and size? Is this a good company in terms of this? Yes, it's a great market, but is this a business model that can solve the problem? And then is this a team that can execute on the business model? And then for us, we ask ourselves, is this a good investment from a return perspective? Because there are many, we're comparing across different types of investments. So I think, yeah, that's my advice in terms of, as an entrepreneur and thinking about bias, like just build a good company. Like if that can be your focus and your core, the good investors, and I think also local investors are also, I support investors with a local presence and local understanding, because then they go beyond the glossy PowerPoint presentation, the flag, the kind of know the market and can go deep into the business.
And Miriam, I know that biases are important to you, and maybe to Andreatta's point as well. I'd love to hear just from your perspective about the considerations when it comes to investing. I mean, is it similar? You're obviously looking for good businesses, but how does there being a woman founder, women executives play into investment decisions as well?
Yeah, actually, I don't think I have to coach anyone, because I also echoing what Andreatta just said, I only put all my efforts into selecting the best entrepreneurs, whether they are men or women. Then it's, I think, my job to help them navigate the investment process and convince my IC that it's a good business to fund. Doing so, because we are very hands-on and entrepreneur-minded, we provide some operational support whenever we can, even before the investment, to make the entrepreneur really go through every step of the process and in the end succeed actually and prove to everyone, including our IC, that they're a good business to fund. And I think we're also lucky enough because Orange is corporate VC. So we leverage our local subsidiaries in 22 countries across Africa and Middle East to source good deal flow. And mostly the teams we're working with are composed of females, so it also helps a lot.
Absolutely, and I think in the interest of time, one last question. We'll open up to Q&A. One question here is, how can we get more African corporates to proactively provide venture capital? And maybe I'll change the question a little bit. And Kathy, since you're fundraising in particular around a gender lens fund, I mean, what are the conversations like with whoever becomes your LPs or institutional investors, or whoever it is that you're fundraising from? You cited some data beforehand, but what are the conversations like around advocating for specifically gender lens investing and having people earmark capital for a fund like yours?
So there's a lot of real goodwill and a desire to do this and to implement it. But to be honest, when the rubber hits the road, I think the will. I think a lot of the DFIs and the 2 times challenge have got a lot of people in the front line that are driving this, but as soon as the fund gets to an investment committee level, social biases still come in. And there's a good research by a lady by the name of Malin Malmström. She's a Swedish woman, and they did research. They recorded 125 pitches by VCs to a Swedish government VC fund that had 5 men and 2 women on the IC. Now, remember, there's women there. And for instance, a male entrepreneur was described as young and promising, and a woman was described as young but inexperienced. So I haven't cracked the nut on how to get over this bias ourselves, because there's still goodwill, but we still haven't cracked it. But what some of the thinking is for these LPs to do bias training, to make sure that the IC is fully represented, and make sure that whoever's doing the DD, for instance, gets briefed before they go and do the due diligence, because there's so much judgment call that goes into every decision you make in investing that there always is some subjectivity that goes on. So I do think that training in bias is a really good idea at every level, even if you've got women in your IC.
I'm curious, Andriata or Miriam, do you have anything to speak to that? I know, again, you mentioned, just looking for good businesses, but have you had any sort of experience like what Kathy just mentioned, and how have you worked through that?
You mean when we are fundraising or when we're making investments? When we're making investments, I can't honestly think of I can't think of an example. I think also this is the thing. By the time we've had several interactions with the entrepreneurs as well. So I think everybody gets enough time to form a view and see different aspects and ask questions. And I think, over time, because also you're also able to compare across, different types of entrepreneurs that you see. So I think, I can't, I don't have a good example of that happening. And then on the LP level, I think what I will say more broadly is that it's difficult to raise capital in Africa, I think, for entrepreneurs and for funds. It took us a couple of years to raise our fund, I think, because we showed up saying we're raising an Africa Tech VC fund. People were still waiting for the actual proposal. We're like, that is the proposal. So I think we're a little bit ahead of our time, but I think what's happening is there's a greater push, at least among DFIs, to see, okay, we need to seed this ecosystem. There is private equity, yes, but then there's also a whole ecosystem that can be built around tech VC, which is providing significant pipeline for their private equity funds and for earlier stage companies. So I think generally it's really difficult to raise, which also makes it hard for the fund managers, because then how do you support such a long fundraising cycle just in terms of keeping the operations running? So I think for the charge, I think, is for the investors to move faster and to also be able to see some of the opportunities that are emerging on the continent.
No one's ever said fundraising in Africa is easy. For sure. We have another question here asking about how can women get into angel investing, and so maybe Miriam, you can speak a little bit. You mentioned Dakar Angel Network. Can you speak a little bit just about the initiatives there in terms of trying to get more women in particular to become angel investors, and the impact that you see in having more women participate in that way?
Yeah, of course. I think the approach for us, so, okay, as I said, the DNA is the first regional angel network in Francophone Africa, and the objective is for sure to help actually Francophone Africa be have more investable companies at scale. And we invest in pre-seed and seed stage companies between 25K to 300K. So to answer the question, I don't know if there's a correct answer for this, because we definitely put the same efforts into attracting women angel investors as well as women, even though, again, we're targeting, on the one hand, experts, people that can provide very specific expertise to our portfolio companies, but also who can dedicate a bit of their time to really help entrepreneurs succeed. So in general, women tend to be, they never push themselves forward. So you always have to target them, and it's probably more difficult and take more time to convince the women to join the network, but in the end, we would invest the same efforts. So as per our network today, I think we have 30% women angel investors. There is still a long way to go, but I think it's also because we currently trying to focus a bit more on attracting more entrepreneurs, because no one better than them can provide sound advice to entrepreneurs. So there are less women entrepreneurs in tech in this region, in this particular region. So it's probably the reason why it is reflected in the statistics. But yeah, I'll say it's just a matter of, I think, communication and putting the right incentives for women as well to be interested in joining a network. So as for ourselves, as I said, actually, we have set up the first investment academy in this region, meaning that we train angels on how to actively be an angel investor, and on potential methods for investing, mentoring, and creating more value for entrepreneurs. So I think it helps a lot. Especially, it helps people that are not really familiar with this, with entrepreneurship in general and in technology. So, yeah, this is probably one of the most innovative activities that we're trying to put in place just to help people to make the right decision to join the network.
Yeah, I think maybe what I'll also add is that there's the ABAN, the Africa Business Angel Network, that they can look up. And then also, I think in different countries, there are angel networks. There's a female-specific one in Nigeria called Rising Tide. So they can also look
also a female-specific one in South Africa and Cape Town, Dazzle Angels as well. So it's starting to happen more and more. But with that being said, I know we're running a little bit over, so I think it's time to wrap up. I just wanted to say thank you to you three as well for joining us and participating and sharing your insights and wisdom. And thank you, obviously, to all of the guests who are attending. We're just going to invite Irene back up just to share a few closing remarks before we jump. And Leo also just said with AfricArena, he said, if there's any other questions, and I apologize that we weren't able to get to them all, but if there's any other questions or requests for information or anything, please do not hesitate to email Leo with some follow-up questions. But thank you to everybody again. And it looks like Irene's coming now.
Thank you, Justin. Hello, everyone again. Good afternoon. I would say good day because we have people who have logged in from different time zones. So it's been very interesting. I would just like to thank our speakers. Unfortunately, you cannot see the applause. This is the thing with the coronavirus and the virtual conferencing. In a physical conference, we should be giving you a standing ovation now, and you'll be seeing all of us. So it's been interesting. A lot of insights have been shared. You can also, and I have also seen that we've had strong engagement from the audience, okay, from the questions and the chat. We have shared a lot of recommendations, a lot of links. So please follow us and access the links, access the books, the recommendations. Just a lasting thing on the lead tech incubation that I spoke about and Lamia also spoke about. Okay, so we will be extending more information out on that. Okay, and yeah, and then I would also like to thank our partners in this webinar, AfricArena. Thank you so very much. I think Justin should just round it up. Justin, are you there, or do I say goodbye to everybody?
I'll come back on. I'll come back on just to say goodbye to everybody. So.
Oh, great. Yeah. Thank you, Justin.
Yeah. Thank you, Irene, and thanks to everybody for joining. And have a good rest of your day.